Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a real pity that I'm not there, but I hope we will have the opportunity to meet again in the near future. I hope you can all see me and hear me properly. Yes, I would assume. So thank you very much once again for the invitation to participate in this workshop that brings together prominent stakeholders in the area of waterborne transport. This is a great opportunity to have an insight of the contemporary challenges of the sector, the policy priorities in place, and how the R&I community, together with the industry, aim to tackle these challenges. I'm very happy I have the chance to demonstrate how we in the European Climate Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency are heavily involved in the process of supporting the European Commission policy priorities for waterborne transport through the research and deployment of sustainable, competitive and safe solutions through the programs that CINEA manages. Therefore, without further ado, I will move on to my short presentation to illustrate the importance of waterborne transport in Europe and globally. Could we move to the next slide, please? So CINEA was established on 1st of April 2021 with the launch of the new multi-annual financial framework and as a continuation of the management of some programs from two other agencies, CINEA and EASME. By capitalizing on the successful achievements of these agencies, CINEA is currently managing more than 2,800 projects, mostly from the legacy, and the steady growth of the portfolio is expected to reach more than 4,500 projects managed in 2027, with a solid increase of delegated budget and staff over the period. And what is our added value? We promote funding and provide green advisory services to potential beneficiaries. We engage directly with the beneficiaries and stakeholders by providing them support all along the project lifecycle. We raise visibility of the program results, and we provide feedback to the European Commission on project and program implementation results in order to redesign the green policies. And of course, we explore areas for harmonization and synergies between the different programs the agency manages and beyond. Next slide, please. So the European Green Deal is the plan to make the EU economy sustainable, and we can do this by turning climate and environmental challenges into opportunities and making the transition just and inclusive for all. CINEA has a key role in supporting the European Green Deal, being the EU focal point for green and infrastructure projects. CINEA will deliver the European Green Deal through the 7 programs that we manage, and you can see them on the screen: the Connecting Europe Facility 2 for Transport and Energy, the Renewable Financing Mechanism, the Just Transition Mechanism, Cluster 5 of Horizon Europe Programme, the Innovation Funds, the LIFE Programme, and the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Funds. We strongly believe that there is a clear strategic coherence between them for the maritime and inland waterways transport. And we invite you to find with us the right instruments to develop your future sustainable waterborne solutions. In the following slides, allow me to highlight those that encompass activities leading to the decarbonization of the waterborne transport. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, CINEA, apart from Horizon Europe, also manages 3 complementary programs. LIFE, which is the EU funding instrument for the environment, climate action, circular economy and quality of life. Innovation Funds, which is one of the world's largest funding programs for the demonstration of innovative low carbon technologies of small and large scale projects, focusing on energy intensive industries, carbon capture, energy storage, and others. Connecting Europe Facility, which is an EU funding instrument to promote growth, jobs, and competitiveness through targeted infrastructure investment at European level. And let's see together through the next slides what CEF Innovation Funds and European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund does and why it's important for the waterborne sector. Next slide, please. So the Connecting Europe facility supports the construction and upgrade of vital infrastructure and encourages the rollout of smarter and safer solutions for transport and energy. SINEA funds projects through the CEF program in the area of sustainability, in line with the Green Deal objectives, smart interoperability, in line with wider digitalization objectives to facilitate trade, seamless connectivity, to meet the objective of integrating the maritime transport in the wider logistics chain, resilient infrastructure in view of unexpected shocks. And with this in mind, CEF2 funded and will fund projects, among others, in the areas of alternative fuel infrastructure facility, vessel traffic monitoring and information systems, river information services, inland single window, inland port community systems. Next slide, please. The Innovation Fund is a key contributor for delivering the European Green Deal. It is a major tool to support industry and the energy and transport sectors in reaching the decarbonization objectives, with a budget of 25 billion euros to be spent until 2030. The main target is to support the industry through the value of death, pursuing ideas from their fundamental research and to the early stage of demonstration. This is done through calls for large and small scale projects, focusing, for example, the next generation of technologies, innovative low carbon technologies, energy storage, and more. Several waterborne related applications were submitted in the course of 2020 for large and small scale demonstrators concerning first of its kind liquid CO2 transport vessels, tankers based on electrical engines and battery packages, e-methanol, hydrogen and fuel cell powered ships, and wind sails. An example of large-scale demonstration projects under the program funding is the project Hydrogen Europax, which is a zero-emission vessel powered by a large-scale fuel cell system, will exclusively use green hydrogen from renewable resources. Next slide, please. The European Maritime, Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund has an overall budget of 0.33 billion for a portfolio that supports more sustainable fishing and aquaculture practices, support the growth potential of the blue economy, and protect marine ecosystems. Since 2018, the European Maritime and Fisheries Funds has been supporting 14 projects in the field of maritime transport, for a total of 24 million euros, funding and involving 12 European countries. These activities mainly focus on the implementation of sea basins regional strategies, such as green shipping strategy in the Western Mediterranean region, and the sustainable ports, and blue economy for the Atlantic region. A particular highlight of the program is the extensive and active participation of dynamic SMEs in the projects. You can see in the images on the left of representative projects, an example such as the development of a giant kite, a rigid wing sail for fishing vessels, and projects with retrofit fuel. Next slide, please. And here is, of course, our waterborne research portfolio in H 2020, with many valuable results from closed projects and promising achievements from projects that are still ongoing. Today is a great opportunity to have an overview of what we have in our hands that will pave the way for the forthcoming research opportunities in Horizon Europe. At a glance, since 2014, SINEA has managed over 56 waterborne transport projects for over 465 million euros. These areas cover the thematic areas of energy efficient and zero emission vessels, innovative shipbuilding and complex value-added specialized vessels, safer and more efficient waterborne operations, infrastructure, and new and improved waterborne transport concepts. But what were the main challenges that have been addressed in each of these thematic areas? Next slide, please. So here, for zero-emission waterborne transport, the Horizon calls were asking the projects to develop innovative solutions to decarbonize shipping in general, to improve the competitiveness of European maritime industries and shipping companies in relation with green shipping, to create a widespread awareness and buy-in for stakeholders towards zero-emission shipping, to better understand the impact of the vessels through monitoring, detection, and modeling of emissions, and of course to provide technical evidence to assess the gaps in the current regulation of vessels and air quality. Next slide, please. There are 18 projects addressing energy efficiency and the development of zero-emission vessels with a budget that represents 30% of the overall budget allocated to waterborne call, which is 465 million euros. Next slide, please. Now, with regards to safe and secure waterborne transport, the Horizon calls were asking the projects to radically redesign the evacuation process and systems for passenger ships, to enhance the prevention and management of fires and at sea without recourse to external intervention, to improve the observation and predictions of oil spreading in the sea using novel online sensors on board vessels, fixed structures or gliders, to build the enabling knowledge, technologies and operational procedures and test them in a real-world environment, to improve transport safety through a more timely, focused and integrated adoption of human factors in order to minimize, of course, the human error. And finally, these solutions that address these risks should and could be reflected within the forthcoming revisions of relevant IMO rules. Next slide, please. There are 9 projects addressing safe and secure waterborne transport with a budget that represents 16% of the overall budget allocated to waterborne, with consortia of more than 200 beneficiaries. Next slide, please. And I have divided the projects that are clustered within the competitive, connected, and automated waterborne transport under 3 more specific categories, which is infrastructures that we have here, new and improved waterborne transport concepts, and innovative shipbuilding and complex value-added specialized vessels. When it comes to infrastructure, the projects had to address challenges related to the improvement of logistics efficiency and integration of the port in the surrounding socioeconomic area, the optimization of passenger and freight flows for low emission mobility, the acceleration of deployment of sustainable alternative fuels and electromobility, and the commitments and contribution to a Europe-wide take-up of technological, non-technological, and social innovative solutions. Next slide, please. For new and improved waterborne transport concepts, the project focused on developing validation, certification, and safety assessment methodologies and tools to support autonomous ships, improving maritime and inland waterways logistics operations, and of course, enhancing modal shift for freight transport, delivering improved systems for waterborne operations, feedering and short sea vessels with regard to smart connection, and developing and demonstrating autonomous vehicles for undersea services and surveillance. Next slide, please. And this cluster, within a cluster, closes with the innovative shipbuilding and complex value-added specialized vessels. Within this category, the projects aimed at providing a comprehensive performance analysis and simulation for new advanced materials and entire constructions of the vessels, developing and validating advanced modular standardized shipbuilding concepts for European waters, increasing the professional skills of workers and the capability of European shipbuilding industry to develop and commercialize specialized vessels, and exploring validating low impact cruise and passenger ships designs and operations. Under this category, next slide please. So there are 29 projects were funded to address competitive, connected and automated waterborne transport. 14% of the budget goes to infrastructure, 19% of the budget goes to innovative shipbuilding, and 29% to new and improved waterborne transport concepts. A budget of more than 250 million euros was allocated to these projects, with consortia of more than 400 beneficiaries. Next slide, please. Of course, the results of the Horizon 2020 program was and will be the bottom line for the research opportunities in Horizon Europe. The Cluster 5 of the program, which CINEA is managing, aims to fight climate change by better understanding its causes, evolution, risks, impacts, opportunities, and by making the energy and transport sectors more sustainable. As of today, we have already finalized the evaluation of 4 first calls for 16 Horizon Europe waterborne related projects. The European Commission services and the partnership is working hard at the moment to deliver the next work program 2023-2024, with the first deadline in April 2023. Next slide, please. And with this state of play for Horizon Europe, I will close my speech, highlighting that it is clear that there are many challenges in front of us for waterborne transport community. And the capitalization of the results that have been already achieved in Horizon 2020 projects and research is one asset that we should exploit to reach the European Green Deal ambitions. Some additional conclusions that I would like to pass is that there are available funds for projects that prove excellence, innovation and commitment to work collectively to deliver on policy orientations and of course industry needs. It is evident that waterborne transport is at a crossroad, and the participation in EU programs offer the first, let's say, mover advantage in order to regain competitiveness for EU industry. What we still need to see is more commitments from ship owners and operators in projects that are developed to ensure this market uptake. CINEA has a pivotal role in this green evolution and the sustainable shift that we all aspire to create. We will be standing next to you to support the EU Green Deal implementation and make Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe results reach the market. And when necessary, we can liaise with other programs. I'm pretty convinced that with hard work together with the entire waterborne transport ecosystem, we could make the climate neutrality happen. And before closing, next slide, please. These are the main communication channels of the agency. I would invite you to download and check our newly published waterborne transport brochure, which has details on our portfolio and details for each of the projects that fall under the categories I've already described. I hope that you will find it very informative and interesting. Thank you very much once again for the opportunity to participate in this workshop. And I wish you all an enlightening session, fruitful discussions, with the expectation that we can all be a bit wiser at the end of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you for this overview about the holistic portfolio of projects that CENEA and also EU is undertaking to helping us reducing the emissions from the waterborne transport. I would like to open up the floor for questions. I will take the questions from the audience here available in person, but then we will move to some of the online questions. There are some microphones that Savine and Christina are having to help you place your questions. Please. There's a question over here from Santiago. Can we switch on the mic here, please?
Hello. Oh.
Yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned about you mentioned about the need to see more commitment from shipbuilders, I guess business. No. So how would you evaluate currently this interest in general of the industry?
And I don't know if you have received the question. So probably the question is that we all agree that the commitment of the private sector in order to make this vision realized is critical, as critical as any policies and motivation. Where do you see right now the current efforts from the private sector from your point of view, and how do you see this will develop in future?
I could answer from a project management point of view, what I see in the consortia and the participation of ship owners, shipbuildings, shipyards in the EU programs. We still need to see more from them. There are projects very innovative with very high budgets, but the consortia in its total, the majority of them consist of research institutions, universities, and there is two very large shipyards and shipping companies that are providing, let's say, ships for demonstrations. But we would need to see that in a better synergy way, let's say, in the next calls, when we have a solid commitment from ship owners and shipbuildings for testing new technologies, because you can see that now we have many projects and many proposals that are coming forward related to new fuels that will be first ever tested in new demonstrators. And to do that, to test the new technologies and check whether it is feasible to have the so-called market uptake, we need the commitment from ship owners to have the demonstrators there available. I would assume that since we're still under discussion about which fuel is going to be the best, the greenest solution, we need the commitment from ship owners to have the demonstrators ready. Let's see what happens in the next Horizon Europe calls with that.
Anna, I will allow myself to ask one question. So you give a very nice portfolio of different projects and the calls. Probably it will be helpful for us to understand the process of building these calls. Is it a public-private dialogue that leads to this write-up of these calls, which comes out for application, or how does the process exactly work in putting out these calls?
So we at CENEA, we provide policy feedback to the European Commission services. And based on the results that we have from projects that we have managed in the previous calls, for example, we have in our hands the work program, and we make suggestions, recommendations. We help them understand based on the results that we have from projects that we manage. Because in CENEA, we have the privilege to be there and monitoring and witnessing the innovation happening. And this is the privilege for project officers working at SENEA, that we can provide feedback to the work program that will be created next, based on the results that we already have from the projects. So it is a cycle. We have the work program that is coming to us from the parent DGs, and we have the opportunity to make recommendations, suggestions, changes in the technology readiness level, for example. Where is the current status of the demonstrator, if it is feasible enough, if it is not, if there is already project there that they already have the results that we have been asking. So in order to have the optimization of the budget and not wasting money, for example, in projects that have already shown the results that the next work program would publish. So we have this supportive role to the European Commission services and to the parent DGs based on the projects and the results that we already have in our hands. And next, they publish the work program, and once the call finishes, then we start at SENEA the evaluation processes with experts from all over Europe.
Thank you very much. Any further questions from the audience? Is there, Matthias, do you have some questions from the online audience for Anna?
Not yet.
Yes.
I'm just asking again.
Yes, if that is not the case right now, probably we will have some questions for the panel discussion later on that we can be posed for other people. But for the time being, Anna, thank you very much again. It was a pleasure having you at least online and then giving this overview about the portfolio, and looking forward to meeting you in person soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
In Lucerne, I'm happy to be with you and to be able to exchange with members of the Nautilus project. So today I was asked to speak about the legislative framework that we have, and we'll be focusing a bit on the European Union, because the EU has a lot in the pipeline for the maritime sector. So I'll just start. Yeah, okay, I can move the slides. Yeah, if it's possible to put it down. Otherwise it will, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We are switching.
Oh, great, perfect. All right, so yeah, I just wanted to begin with the scenario that we developed in our decarbonization study for shipping. So we analyzed the different technological pathways and to analyze how can shipping decarbonize fully by 2050. The main results of the study show that energy efficiency has a big role to play. We could cut up to 1/3 of emissions. Yes, so it's, yeah, thank you, okay. Yes, so I was saying that energy efficiency is important. It can cut up to 1/3 emissions. Electrification in ports is also important. It's more of the order of 6% of emissions that we could cut. But really the bulk of emission reductions is when you change the fuel, of course. And here we recommend fully sustainable fuels that can achieve zero emission. And these are what we call green e-fuels. So we have, of course, different solutions, different sustainable fuels, depending on the shipping segment, because the maritime transport is quite specific in that regard, that it's not like aviation where you can blend e-kerosene, for example, in any plane. For ships, it really depends on the ship size, but also the segment. So here there are some examples of sustainable fuels. So there could be direct electricity for smaller ships, especially on lakes, so for example in the lake in Lucerne, or for larger vessels, the direct use of hydrogen, either in combustion engines or in fuel cells, is possible. But for longer distances, and this is more, well, let's say for big container ships, we would see derivatives of green hydrogen. So for example, green ammonia, green methanol, but also synthetic diesel or synthetic methane or possibilities. Right. I'd like to show as well a scenario from the International Energy Agency that is quite interesting, because it clearly shows that fuels such as ammonia, hydrogen are really key to lead us to a net zero scenario by 2050. So here indeed the role of LNG is quite small, at least in the form of a fossil fuel. There are a lot of concerns today on the use of LNG as a marine fuel. Notably, the World Bank has issued a report last year where it warned policymakers against the use of this fuel because of the risks of stranded assets. So this is something that investors have in mind when investing in projects. Right, and there are also, as I was saying before, other alternatives that are zero emission and which are funded also by the European Union, as presented by the previous speaker. I think that one very interesting example here is the Northern Explorer in Norway. So of course, this is a much smaller ship than a typical cruise ship, but it could run on a hybrid electric propulsion and hydrogen fuel cells. And this is already something that is being ordered. So we would have 14 ships already by 2025. Right, so here comes the regulation. The European Green Deal translated into a legislative agenda, a package of proposals that were put on the table by the European Commission last year. And now we are in the process of the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union that are negotiating the details, and especially the level of ambition is being discussed. Because it might sound a lot for maritime transport to achieve in the coming years, but from the point of view of environmental organizations, the package is actually not enough. And this is what I like to talk to today. Right, so here's an overview of the different shipping proposals that are being proposed. One is about the demand side, so how to ensure the uptake of new fuels, and this is the FuelEU Maritime. One is about the carbon price, so how do you put a polluter pays principle also in this sector. The other one is the Renewable Energy Directive. This is about the fuel suppliers and bunkering infrastructure, because of course we also need to have compatible refueling points in ports. So this is a whole framework. And so starting with the EU emissions trading scheme for shipping. So it's simply applying the polluter pays principle to the sector. So you put a price on carbon, and then it will work as a market. What has been proposed is to cover half of the emissions from the European Union to third countries. And here, so I just put a few points that are in discussions currently by policymakers. It's really what type of ships should be covered. So should it be from 5,000 gross tonnage or from 400 gross tonnage, etc., and the coverage of emissions, so not only CO2, but also methane, nitrous oxide. What we recommend for the EU ETS is to use the revenues to finance the decarbonization of the shipping sector. This could be done via carbon contracts for difference. And it works like that we basically subsidize the difference between the dirty fuel and the clean fuel. And this would help to finance early deployments of e-fuel ships. But of course, we cannot finance every ship. And that's why we have other proposals, so complementary proposals, such as the FuelEU Maritime. Let's read the core legislation. Perhaps as probably most of you are familiar with IMO regulations rather than EU regulations. So this is the difference between the FuelEU Maritime design and the existing international regulations. Existing international regulations are very much focused on the tailpipe emissions. So we don't take into account what happens before the combustion, whereas it's quite important for the sustainability of the fuel. And it only accounts for CO2, whereas there are other greenhouse gases. And most importantly, the FuelEU Maritime will only look at the fuel switch. So no matter what the energy efficiency effort is, this will not be taken into account. So it's only about the fuel switch. Right. This is the full design of the FuelEU Maritime proposal. We did a study on this legislative proposal, taking the life cycle GHG analysis that is provided by the European Commission. And we compared the GHG footprint of every maritime fuel. So this is all based on data provided by the Commission. We didn't invent anything. And what is interesting to see is how the different fuels will progressively cease to comply with the regulation, because the FuelEU Maritime regulation will put a GHG intensity target on the every unit of megajoule that is used. So, of course, it starts very mildly in the first years, but then it is a bit more stringent. It's particularly relevant, I think, so for the case of LNG, because the GHG footprint of LNG very much depends on the type of engine that is used. So the difference that you can see between the types of engines is typically the emission slip. The four-stroke engines that are used usually on cruise ships are the worst ones, and the GHG footprint is usually higher than current diesel ships. Right. What we have criticized in this proposal is that the targets in the first years, in the first 15 years, are so low that it greenlights fossil fuels until 2040. So you can use purely fossil fuels until that date, and you can still comply. In our analysis, based on the cost of the fuels, we forecasted that LNG demand could be driven from 6% today to 23% already in 2030. So this is quite significant. And this is why we recommend other approaches to ensure that the uptake of sustainable fuels arrives much quicker. One tool that is quite important is to raise the targets. Currently, the targets that have been proposed by the European Commission do not go to zero emission by 2050. So, of course, if we want to respect the Paris Agreement, we need to put these targets in the good context. This is the main proposal from Transport and Environment. So to ensure sufficient uptake of green hydrogen-based fuels. So here we're talking about green hydrogen, green ammonia, green methanol, but it could also be synthetic diesel or synthetic methane. We need to have a mandate on ships to use a certain percentage, a minimum percentage already by 2030. This is key to encourage the demand and make sure that we meet our decarbonization targets by 2050. So we recommend 6% by 2030, and this is something that is being discussed in the European Parliament right now, and which might be voted in October. Another tool that we recommend in complement is to have a bonus, a multiplier, which would count several times the use of e-fuels towards the GHG intensity targets, so that these fuels become artificially cheaper. Because today the problem that we have is that there is a big price gap between clean fuels and dirty fuels. So we need to bridge this gap, and we think that a multiplier would be a right option to encourage ship owners to invest in these fuels. Okay, just to conclude, the last piece of legislation that is quite important for the shipping sector is about the infrastructure. So this is a map of 10 ports in Europe, so the main ports, which will have to deploy infrastructure and, well, green infrastructure. Today, the current proposal on the table has good aspects. One good aspect is that by 2030, cruise ships, passenger ships, and container ships will have to plug into shoreside electricity. So this is an important step towards zero-emission ports. However, the mandate on refueling infrastructure is only about LNG. So there is only a mandate on core ports to deploy LNG infrastructure. But to deploy really green fuels, we believe that it would be relevant to extend this mandate to hydrogen and ammonia, which also needs dedicated infrastructure in ports. And here, I think that there can be a lot of synergies that could be made because ports aim to become hydrogen hubs. They will have to import hydrogen also in the form of ammonia to decarbonize other sectors than shipping. So here it would be quite a synergy, so also in terms of costs, to have these ships that are going to import the hydrogen also to be fueled with hydrogen. And this is, for example, something that has happened for LNG in the past and which helped to rise the uptake. So for that, these are just a few examples of ports that either already have hydrogen infrastructure, such as the port of Antwerp, or planning to deploy it. And yeah, and this is an overview of the policy recommendations that we have for the European package of proposals. Thank you very much for your attention.
So, yes, thank you very much, Delphine. So it's a good overview of things to come. There are, I'm sure, questions from the audience. And if there are any online, I look at my colleague to raise the hand because we don't see this necessarily on this monitor. So there's a question from, hang on, you get a microphone.
Thank you, does it work? Yeah. Could you, you said that you think it would be the best idea to add a multiplier of 5 to bridge the gap between the prices and the fuel. I don't really understand what that means. Could you elaborate on that? Like
yeah,
the multiplier.
Sure. That's really a kind of virtual mechanism, so you don't need any public subsidies for this. It's a bit like if you enter in a shop and you want to purchase something and they will tell you, okay, but today is a special promotion, let's say, and you can buy the same thing. Well, you can buy 5 things for the price of 1. And this is what would happen for ship owners who have bought, for example, a methanol ship like Maersk today, and they will want to fuel these ships with some kind of fuel. It could be fossil methanol or it could be e-methanol. The difference between the two is, of course, the price. So if Maersk chooses e-methanol, then the price of compliance with the GHG target would become 5 times smaller.
So, yeah, so there's another question on methanol, maybe?
Kind of, yes. So I was going to ask about the alternative fuels, because I noticed that throughout your presentation, you mentioned specifically the ammonia and hydrogen. So I wanted to understand what is actually like embedded in the policies. I mean, are they kind of pushing to ammonia and hydrogen in particular, or these were just examples of different potential fuels that we could take into account?
So what I showed is more so the vision of transport and environment as to what are the most sustainable fuels from the climate perspective. But the European Commission proposals are completely what we call technology neutral, so they don't differentiate between the fuels, at the exception of the AFIR regulation on ports, where it's actually a monofuel approach, so you only have a LNG mandate. But ultimately, so what we recommend, this mandate of 6% on ships, this would be open to any propulsion technology as long as the fuel is produced from renewable hydrogen. So it could be 6% of synthetic methane or synthetic diesel or methanol, ammonia, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then question here from Asif Ansar.
Thank you very much, Delphine. The increase or displacement of the fossil fuel with synthetic fuels, you gave a very nice chart, which is very appreciable. The basis of this gradual stepwise increase of displacement of fossil fuel with synthetic fuel, are these wishes from your side, a vision from your side, or there are something that you see are pragmatic? Exactly some of these, this chart and the next chart as well, which gives some of the e-fuel in the EU shipping that you're putting up demand and balance. These values, are there some calculation about availability and deployment behind that, or this is still sort of a visionary approach towards the addition?
Yeah, so this figure of 6%, it's not in law yet. This is a recommendation from ours, and it's based on our study for decarbonizing shipping, which took a shipping stock model. So we looked at the existing fleets, the age of these fleets, because there are a lot of vessels today that are arriving to the end of their life. So there will be a significant renewal happening in the coming years. So the 6% is feasible from the renewal perspective. It would be only new vessels. So this doesn't even take into account possible retrofits.
Okay, thank you. So if there are more, there's a question from the chat.
Yes, there is one question from the chat, but before I would like to also ask one question. You're talking about the e-fuel costs right here. Which e-fuels did you consider here, especially the liquid-based ones, for example, like e-diesel, whatever, or also mostly the gaseous phase ones?
Sure. So for the purpose of our analysis, we took e-ammonia as an example, but e-fuels come at different costs. E-ammonia is generally considered as the cheapest one among e-fuels. But for example, e-methanol or e-diesel would be among the most expensive. So yeah, so we calculated that we need a multiplier of 5 to bridge the price gap between green ammonia and other alternative fuels. But this you might need a bit more for other e-fuels, or perhaps the price gap is going to be reduced also by higher costs of fossil fuels, as we are seeing today. These are cost assessments for 2030.
So did you also take into account the different efficiencies of using, for example, NH3 like ammonia within different kind of systems, or within ICE engines when you're using LNG, let's say?
So we assessed the potential of LNG indeed, but we focused on the GHG footprint and on the fuel costs. And then based on what we see from projects from the industry, on the announcements of shipyards in Asia, for example, that are already planning big ammonia container ships. So we see the technology coming. Now it's really a question of how do we encourage the uptake by policy. And of course, it comes with different characteristics, different physical characteristics. So not every fuel is suitable for every type of vessel, of course.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks. Then I also wanted to ask one question from the chat. I just read. It's coming from Meyerwerf, Daniel Zahn. There is another financial regulatory scheme, the taxonomy regulations adopted by the EU, applying the tailpipe approach. Obviously, this tailpipe approach is wrong, as it not reflects the fuel production story. What does TNAE plan to do in order to correct this misleading regulations?
Thank you for it. It's a very important question, the framework for sustainable finance. And it is true that the first criteria that were proposed were only tailpipe. And we flagged this to the Commission. And I can't really tell of the process because this is still something confidential, and we have helped also with, so Mayor Wirth was actually involved in the discussions. And I think that, yeah, together we have pushed for a life cycle approach, but it still remains to be seen what will be ultimately decided by the European Commission in the next few months.
Yes, I hope that answered the question. Daniel, can you maybe send a yes or a no? That would be lovely in the chat. He's saying thanks. Okay.
Okay. This follows up with another
just
question.
one question about the LNG topic. Even in the beginning of your slides, you already mentioned that there is some recommendations against it, no, from a point of view of maybe other jurisdictions, no, but and even in the chart you showed, it seems like at some point it's going to be not non-compliant, no. From the chart you showed, basically just very few fuels could be compliant.
Yeah.
So would you like say that it's recommended to not use it as for a long term? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a big controversy at the moment. And the issue is more and more rising in the media. We see it. There are some ship owners that have already decided that they will not use LNG. Others have decided that they want to go for the LNG pathway, and perhaps sometime biomethane or synthetic methane would kick in. As an environmental organization, we voice out concerns regarding possible stranded assets because of the long lifetime of vessels. And what I showed here is that this policy from the European Union to actually encourage LNG via very low GHG intensity targets in the beginning, and then you have a very big step coming in 2040. This can give very mixed signals to the industry. So we might end up in a situation where there will be a lot of investments. A quarter of the fleet could turn to LNG already in just 8 years' time. And then there will be a real question on the availability of these renewable gas fuels. So we would not recommend it, in short.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think if there are more questions, we can follow up with those in our panel discussion later on. I'd like to thank you, Delphine.
Thank you.
For making your way here as well, and joining us and presenting.
From German Aerospace, I will be talking about the Nautilus. Though my name is Sandeer, but I will already start by the good and strong collaboration. You cannot hear me? It's all good, right? Yes, I could use the pointer. Thank you very much. Absolutely. So I would like to name it because I will be not just presenting the data that's attained by DLR or by me, but all the partners together. So alphabetically, Carnival, Maritime, Chantier d'Atlantique, Garant, EPFL, Lloyd's Register, MAN Energy Solution, Meyer Werft, RWTH Aachen, TU Delft, BTT, RUG, Lund, University of Lund, and Solid Power. And in this case, the Solid Power we have from Switzerland. So welcome. Thank you for welcoming us in your home country, but also the Solid Power from Italy. And thank you that you are joining us again in person, and the people who are joining us online, welcome. I will not be talking about holistic approaches and portfolio. The focus will be very much, why did we start the project Nautilus when we had a couple of years back with Herman Joseph and Laurent sitting together, and we start having this discussion about trying to do something which will have an impactful meaning towards reducing the carbon intensity in the shipping. And then the idea, and it's not just about idea about the technology, but overall scope comes in. And I would like to start by thanking already Anna and Delphine for putting up the ground and letting me have almost 5 extra minutes that I will be talking today. Let us see if the IT helped me utilize those 5 minutes properly. All right, so somebody help me get to the next slide, please. Probably, yes. All right, thank you very much. So maritime transport corresponds to 2.6% of the greenhouse gases, give and take. In comparison, aviation, which has seen a lot of pressure already and has been talked about, is somewhat lower than maritime transport. And as a comparison, the largest polluter as an industry, that is one of the largest, is the cement industry, which has much larger, almost threefold higher greenhouse gases compared to the maritime transport. But CO2 is only one part of the story. We have to understand that now we are started to talk about the greenhouse gases, and now we are talking about the CO2 emission. But for long enough, there has been discussion about reducing what we call other pollutants. And when we will talk about the LNG, or when we will talk about the e-methane, we need to always look into two perspectives. The reduction potential for the CO2 or the greenhouse gases, other greenhouse gases, including methane, which is also a potent greenhouse gas. But then we have to also talk and have a sensibility towards other pollutants, which are SOx, NOx, PM 2.5, that needs to be reduced. And of course, in that case, is the IMO target also differs, right? So there are targets which are for the greenhouse gases, for the CO2 emissions, and then there are targets which are corresponding to the other pollutants. NOx is probably the most known, where are the regulation in place, but also the SOx and other that's coming into it. We have already heard from the talks that there is, I'm just trying to look at my cursor, yes, so there is a possibility to reduce almost by 50% in the coming decade, and at least by 2050, and then trying to approach, if possible, almost 100% reduction. Here we must be clear that we are talking about a net zero emission. The discussion about local emission is still a controversial one, and that has to be taken into consideration, right? So again, I would like to start by emphasizing two things. Discuss about the reduction of the CO2 or equivalent of CO2 on one hand, but discuss about other pollutant reductions on other side as well. And other pollutants are relevant, and we have a long debate about it before we starting to talk about the global warming and start about the CO2 reduction, because there is CO2 does not harm health directly, other pollutants do that. So there is a quite long effect. This is a result from France that has came out, whether it's lungs, blood, vascular system, brain, heart, or reproduction. All of them, SOx, NOx, the PM particle has a direct health adverse effects that's coming up, and we are still learning more about them. The knowledge is not enough. So again, coming back, that prior to putting a regulation about the CO2, there was much harder regulations that the shipping industry and all of us has to take care of, the reduction of these other pollutants. Third aspect, which is more specific for the cruise industry. The cruise industry is considered as a leisure industry. The cruise industry has been one of the largest growth economic factor before COVID in Europe and worldwide. We all love to go to cruise. I would love to stay in one of those places. The challenge is the people who are on top of the deck loves it. The people who are not on top of the decks disgust that. And that perception is because we see them If we are not enjoying them, then we are seeing them as a hazard, right? But the reality is, majority of us would love to be on one of the ships of Meyer-Werft or of Chantier Atlantique to enjoy this thing. Only if we know that this is a clean ship, and that is what we are trying to go for right now. All right, now before we go into different, I would like to set up, and I want to thank Meyer-Werft for providing some of these reference points. So we start from the reference point, which is back in 2008, not today. So go in the past. I will go there where there was not LNG, not fuel. So the fuel that was of choice was at that time was heavy fuel oil. The engine was a diesel generator, a diesel engine and diesel generator. And there was probably no exhaust treatment that was happening. And at that time, we would say that the emissions that were coming up were 100% CO2, and then NOx was 100%. As a reference point, we take it 100% PM and sulfur oxide. What happens is that now, if you look into it, there's already a first phase of transition that is ongoing. And in this talk, I will tell you that this transition, which is happening in the maritime sector, can be divided or somehow help us going into three major phases, three major paradigm shifts. The first shift is already in place before even we conceived the project Nautilus. And this was already happening, that the shipping industry was working in getting away from the heavy fuel oil to something more cleaner. And the cleaner is not just CO2 cleaner, the cleaner is also the cleaner more for the other pollutants, and was trying to then go away from the heavy fuel diesel generators to more the gas engines or gas motors that were used to generate the electricity. And then at the intermediate phase, there was, of course, these exhaust treatment that was put in place more and more to reduce the pollutants. Has no effect almost on the CO2, but the other pollutants. But then going towards the LNG or the gas allowed them to get rid of some of these post-treatments. They are implementing now to go to the Euro 6 conditions as well. And if we assume that going from the heavy fuel oil to LNG, there was, all right, the shipping industry were themselves also quite neat in that. So they expected to have a reduction of the CO2, but because of the methane slip, they said, we will not probably have a much gain if we talk only about the CO2. But they're already seeing that the NOx, the PM, and the sulfur oxide, if the zero is, if not exactly 0%, was very low amount, right? And they will already gain in other pollutants. Now, this is already the first phase that we were looking at. And this first phase is not something thought through. This first phase was bought by the market. So again, this is a data from the Meyer Group, and we see this thing that back in June 2015, all the purchase order was for heavy fuel oil. And then now we look at just before the COVID, June 2019, almost 88 of future orders were LNG. And I was just talking to Laurent from Chantier Atlantique, and he said that now all the future orders at their chantier, at their shipyard, are only based on the LNG which is there. Okay, now this being said, so the position is that, so coming back to the question that what we are going to do next, how we are going to attain the next phase of reduction of emissions, both the pollutants and the greenhouse gases. And there where the project Nautilus was conceived, an idea that now couple this system, replace the gas engines to another onboard generator that provides at least 10% higher efficiency, but more importantly, enables to avoid methane slip. And this is a key point. The efficiency can take you as far as possible, but this methane slip will be a critical point to implement. But also not only reduce the other pollutants as was seen, but go down by 99%, right? When we have these kind of targets coming in place, then we already see this thing that need to be a new energy system, and where we come to a fuel cell, more specifically with our partner together, the Soil Power, we conceived a technology that was solid oxide fuel cell and hybridized together with the battery. This will be enabled to increase the efficiency by 10%, reduce the methane slip to 0, and also as other pollutants, the SOx, NOx, PM by 99%. Now together, we want to not have just a concept, we wanted to do an engineering overall integration of such system in the ship in multi-megawatt, more specifically from 5 to 60 megawatt. And largely, we want to maintain with this the competitiveness of Europe, especially in the cruising industry. So here's on the right-hand side, you see an illustration of such a system, fuel cell appearing in the yellow, the batteries appearing in the green, and this will be an LNG tank that will be appearing in blue color. Right. Now, such a system will be conceived as a modular design to start with, typically 10 systems making up almost a 1 megawatt unit, and multiple of these 1 megawatt units will be put together in 2 or multiple engines to get to the capacity between 5 megawatt to 60 megawatt, and should take care of all the needs of hotels, equipment, propulsion, whether it's steady state maneuvering or in the anchoring condition. The idea of hybridizing in the beginning was mostly to have the possibility of the peak shaving, but now we have advanced enough that the batteries do not provide an advantage in terms of peak shaving, but they do provide an advantage in transient shaving. A key aspect that we are coming in is that in order to make it viable, this technology, we are going into a stepwise fashion that it will be hybridized together with the ICE, with a micro or mild hybridization, going towards a balanced hybridization that half of is still ICE and half of them will be fuel cell because of the mitigating the financial risks and the technology risk. And the last but not the least, that it will be having a full transition going from the ICE engines to the fuel cell. And by that time, we will attain our overall objectives of reduction of the carbon dioxide as well as the pollutants. Right. The challenge is following. On one side, we already have quite high electrical efficiency, and thermal efficiencies comes on top of it. This is, for example, one of the fuel cell different scheme of the fuel cell, and where there is the fuel cell system of Nautilus. And we have been working already in the project to bring this technology further to higher efficiency, and I will show you the result afterward. A more challenging aspect is, since the technology has been developed for land-based application, one of the challenges is specific power density or the watt per liters, and this stands quite low. And for the shipping, this is a major side which we have to the design and the layout of the shipping within the ship. We're trying to go further. The good sign is already for the automotive sector, based on this technology, a much higher specific densities or volumetric densities was attained, not specific, volumetric density was attained, and our target is already to re-achieve this value that was attained for the automotive sector, and this is doable. So we are all through these processes, we are suggesting the processes and the technology which are doable and implementable today. Okay, some of the quick results. So we did do a very extensive design with 50 to 60 megawatt using the typical engineering practices. Advanced PNID was developed with optimized heat exchange network as well as anode recirculation. So the crust, without going into all the detail of it, the outcome is that we are attaining an electrical efficiency of such a system that will be more than 64% electrical. And if we combine the heat and electrical, we will be able to reach to the 87%. And this should be noted, this is the good heat. This is the heat which is well above 300 degrees centigrade at the exhaust, close to the 500 degrees centigrade, which allow to utilize this heat effectively for onboard application. We did very extensive modeling, mostly in the transient model of the fuel cell only, but also fuel cell and the battery. And the purpose of these models from the cell to the stack module level, but also the hybrid system, was twofold. One, to see that how the behavior of the fuel cell, depending on the demand, will change. So this is an example that if the load is changing, how does the voltage as well as temperature changes? Well, what does it mean for an engineer, for example? it means this thing. So some of the work that you will also see if you're staying for the conference, there will be some talks coming up from German Aerospace Center, but also from other colleagues from Aachen, for example, on the right-hand side, that also tells that how much airflow rates and how much other parameters has to be changed in order to maintain the performance and get the output that we require to these conditions. And the right-hand side, we see some of the control strategies, that how should be the balancing between the batteries and the fuel cells under different conditions to take care of those transients that are taking place. Right? Now going to next, we are not just doing the modeling work at DLR, but also at the solid power. We have developed 2 test rigs which allow us to test these fuel cells, the large stack modules in the 30 kilowatt capacity, but also hybridize it with a battery system and run experiments. I will not go, these are some of the older data, but there are newer data that will be presented in the coming publication. And here we see this thing that already at an efficiency, even at a not reaching to the full temperature, we reach with the methane an efficiency of about 75, so electrical efficiency of 52.5% at low temperature. And the target is, with the new data, you will see that the efficiency, electrical efficiency that we saw on the concept of 64% will be achievable in our proof of concept at the demonstrator as well, right? So that will be shown in the next data. And this is a key point into it. Analysis done by our colleagues at TU Delft also mentioned this thing. The same system can be operated with different fuels, including ammonia, but the electrical efficiency is highest by using methane. Now, the source of this methane is what determines where the CO2 will come from or this will go to. Last but not least, thank you very much for sending me this data. So we took those fuel cells that we want to put on board, but then we put also on this inclination platform and turn and twist them to do that. If what will happen to such a fuel cells if we are putting on board a ship. So the data is still in the raw form, but data is completed. So it's just I'm told, and I think that the TU Delft colleagues will be showing this data soon. And thank you very much for sending all the people from Solid Power who did this testing together with the TU Delft colleagues. So that was an amazing exercise. So we train astronauts almost in the similar way. Yeah. Yes, so I come to the last slide before my time goes up. So we talked about the second phase of transition, where so far some of you will say that I have been talking about LNG. Yes. So am I advocating LNG as a fuel for the future? The answer is we want today an energy system that can operate with existing system of ICE, can hybridize it with the same kind of fuel without defunctioning the existing assets and existing infrastructure. That LNG can be blended and displaced. So instead of using the fossil LNG, even tomorrow, we can start mixing with biomethane. We can start mixing it with e-methane. And that means the leakages, the methane slip will go away by our technology, but also the CO2 emission that we are worried about coming from the methane, since this methane will be synthetic, we will avoid the challenge of the CO2 emissions. And since the infrastructure is available already on ports today, and since the technologies is already going towards LNG, we can utilize and maximize our leverage on existing investments and assets. That is why we are saying LNG for today, a second phase of technology already start to implement, and then start in the third phase of technology already now, but definitely by 2030 and after 2030, displaces LNG completely with biomethane or e-methane, or if necessary, a second type of e-fuel. And for that, our Nautilus design already is separating that the power blocks will be separated from the reformer. So should we decide for a different kind of reformer and not the methane reformer, then we do not have to defunct the whole power block. We only have to change the reforming system, right? So that is the strategy. And there, I would just want to leave it that we are not just working on the fuel side, the fuel to power, but also a project on H2 Mare, where these two technologies are the renewable power together with high temperature co-electrolysis, enabling us to produce directly e-methane by capturing CO2, the green hydrogen or water, and making it into carbon monoxide and hydrogen and making it directly into CH4. And that is a kind of a vision that we want to implement in Nautilus as well. With that, I would like to conclude. Again, I want to come to 3 phases, which is the vision, the key vision, why we want to support and go forward with Nautilus. Already, first transition is ongoing, which is heavy fuel oil is giving way to LNG. That means also that diesel generators are giving way to gas engine. And this already introducing 10 to 15% lower CO2 and 7 to 80% lower pollutants. The first reasons why shipping industry moved towards the LNG at the first place. We would like to leverage on that. We want to increase the energy efficiency by 10%, but also want to introduce a technology that will not allow methane slip. That is a key point to take. This high efficiency and no methane slip will allow us to go to a reduction about 40 to 50% of the CO2 reduction net, but more importantly, almost 99% reduction of the pollutants. By gradual changing, we can still utilize the existing existing infrastructure on board and off board infrastructure, whether that's power system or the supply of the fuel, and then move into the third phase where this LNG will be able to be displaced with e-methane and biomethane and let us do the net zero waterborne transport. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Asif, for this incredibly interesting insight and for the slides. I think there are lots of questions and comments. You already have the microphone. I just would like to make everyone aware of the time that we actually have now a break for half an hour. But I'm checking if we can, I'm checking with the technique at the back, if we can still take a few questions. So I say 2 and then reconvene maybe later at the dialogue or at the coffee break. So I'd like to take 1 question here from the room and maybe if there's one online from online and then come back and then break for coffee, but I say that then.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks Asif for the great talk. I actually have a question to your comparison between HFO and LNG. So you were pointing out like the improvement that you could obtain already from LNG, and there was like a drop in temperature on your slide. Could you explain where this came from? It was in one of the early slides.
I have to go back. I don't remember the drop in the temperature.
Yeah. Okay, it's storage temperature. Okay.
Okay.
So that clarified it for me.
Right.
Actually, I was wondering if there was something in the process.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Then there is. I thought just one question from the audience.
I mean, Delphine is asking a question. We have to allow that, right?
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, that's also a technical question. So you say on your last graph that the engine allows a 40 to 50% CO2 reduction. So my question would be, how does this translate in GHG emissions? Because obviously, so you have no methane slip, but there are also methane emissions happening on all of the value chain before the use, and if this is calculated in tailpipe or a life cycle. Thank you.
Yes. So I think that we need to come to an agreement that the majority of the methane slip when we talk about happens because of at the engine level. So there are leakage that does happen throughout the value chain, but the amount of the methane slip that is happening at the engine level is far superior than the happening. But please for the 2 shipping industry can correct me on that. So our target is that if the majority of that methane slip, which is happening on onboard energy generation, could be avoided by far, then this value is reasonable to attain. And also this value is normally calculated for only onboard generation. So we're not talking well to wheel, we are talking about the tank to power system or tank to propeller system. This reduction is primarily calculated at.
Thank you. Also,
Yes,
then there's questions from the
Yes, there's one question from Kinolitis, in the past TKMS, and I think now is at Zeppelin Power Systems. He's asking, how do you see the future of this synthetic natural gas in view of taxonomy?
So it will be synthetic methane, not synthetic natural gas. I mean, because it will be predominantly methane. So I think that I'm not will not go into that detail right now. The question, I think that there's both analysis done, which will be a deliverable that will be coming out in public, in which the work by the TU Delft, but also the University of Lund, which is exactly looking at this challenge. One point I just want to mention this thing that didn't come across. So we often talk about the PM10, PM2.5. These are the two most known particles. When we go from LNG, whether that's a fossil LNG or synthetic methane, there's a kind of the particle that we don't often talk about. This is called the ultra-fine particles. And there is still a lot of understanding that needs to be developed, that, how does this ultra-fine particles, which are mostly in the micro to the nanoscale range, and we have very little understanding, how does this affect, though we know quite extensively already the effect on the human health on the 2.5, but how does this ultra-fine particles will affect the human health? And there is, of course, an understanding or a gap in understanding which need to be developed to be able to answer this question in full. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So, Kino, if you could write if that was sufficient for now.
Presentation is not so much scientific, so I'm more going in the design of cruise ships and talking a little bit about what really has happened about this. So I will give you a short history of our company, which is a long company, 225 years, and I will come back to this. So we have three different areas where we have our shipyards in Germany, Finland, and another one in Eastern Germany, with total about 7,000 employees, and we are focusing on this product portfolio. So cruise vessels, river cruise vessels, ferries, passenger ships, research vessels, island. It's quite long. And then I can show you the next one. This is what it's left over. Then we must say our industry is in a very hard competition in regard to the Asian shipyards. And this is also one of the motivation to really invest in new technologies, to be in front of all the technologies. This is quite important for us to stay alive in this market. But I think it's also important to know for all these people here inside the room that we are under a strong competition. And this is something the maritime industry is worldwide working. And we are developing a lot of these things. And for us, it's really also important to keep this knowledge really in Europe. This is really quite important for us to stay alive with our industry. So coming a little bit back, and this is maybe the last picture from Laurent showed it. So we was already carbon free in our past. Then we have built wooden sailing ships. So, but what is the difference between the other one, what we are doing today? This is a modern LNG-driven vessel. At least at this time where you are using these wooden ships, you are not knowing when you are arriving, or if you are arriving in any case, alive or not. And also the size, volume and everything, it's quite different. So there is a development in this direction. And I think we cannot turn back. And I think Laurent has shown this picture, but this will not be valid for the complete vessel to return to sailing. So what we have to do, okay, we have come from the dark side of the world into the clean side of the world. So we have to do something. And this is really what we are looking inside. So you have used already some of this. I can pass through it completely. You said already we are started in 86 with heavy fuel oil, which was the bad thing we could do. But all this, what is coming now, was focused on the routes and the routes for the emissions from the IMO, based on sulfur, based on NOx, SOx, and all these particles. And then we entered into this LNG, what you also explained already, which was a step forward in regard to prevent of the emissions. Sorry, I'm blocking your view. In regard to the emissions of the sulfur and the particles, but this is not the final solution. We still have fossil fuel. So then the next step is to enter into the renewable fuels, but then we still have something, but I think we can scope with this with technical solutions with after treatment. And then maybe the vision is come to really a zero emission ship, and a fuel cell could be one way to this, but this is the way we have now to describe. So, but we have done a lot, this already Laurent mentioned also. Then we are not focused only on the fuels, we are focused on energy efficiency. And similar as Laurent has shown it, if you see, we started in 2001, and we reduced more or less by 50% the energy consumption of the ship. And this is nothing to do with the, so we have not to produce this energy. And if you don't have to produce it, this is a saving in itself. So this is the best way, the first way you can do. On the other hand, we are looking for all these different technologies. We are looking also in the future for the energy distribution to improve this energy production, and we are looking really deeply in new fuels or alternative to fuels. So, but this is what you are facing now in the newspapers. So every day you see a new article from wherever, from whomever, who said, okay, this is a silver bullet and let's go this way. At the moment, we don't see really that there is a silver bullet. Then there are a lot of alternatives, and I think we have really to be to look deeper inside all of these alternatives. So we have synthetic diesel, we have gas and synthetic gas, we have methanol, ammonia, hydrogen, we have shore power, we have batteries. At the moment, we have then to look what is really behind this. Laurent has a different graphic, but this shows exactly more or less it's from the same content. So we see the energy content is the important thing of the different fuels. So if you look for the marine diesel, you have a quite good energy content, and then it goes down. So, but that does not mean that all the other fuels are out of the race. Then I think you have, for different application, you can use also different fuels. If you have a ferry which going from this side of this lake to the other side, then it's easily to use electrical energy, then there is no losses, more or less. Then I will come to the price for the alternative energy we have to pay. So then you can already see what maybe has Laurent already explained. With the change from diesel to LNG, we lost already a lot of available space on the ship. So it was already a big invest for the owner. Then he was losing really payable space based on this technology. This was one step forward in this time. Okay, I think the figures are spoken for themselves. So we listed all these fuels to give only an overview on this. So we have to look for the availability of the fuels. So for some fuels, we have already a distribution system. For some fuels, we have no distribution system at time. One item, I don't know, I think you mentioned it already. Some of the fuels has the option for blending. So you have the possibility to phase in an improvement of the CO2 footprint based on the blending of the fuels, that you can put biofuel or synthetic fuel in addition to the fossil fuel to reduce the figures. This is only the same picture. I think you have, everybody from us has shown it in this way. So to come from hydrogen via electric to the fuel, but still you have in mind that we have to use 2 to 3 megajoule renewable energy to produce 1 megajoule fuel. So this is the cost driver, and this is also what is behind. And one comment, then everybody in the industry is now looking for hydrogen, not only the maritime industry. So if you are looking to steel production, to cement production, so we need a lot of green hydrogen to really fulfill all these demands. The next foil was really produced more or less for, we have often the discussion in regard to climate neutral and or carbon neutral or carbon free. Then there are still some people to discuss, to understand what is really carbon neutral. So you have to take carbon out of the atmosphere to put it into together with hydrogen into fuel, and then you can release this carbon again. Then it's neutral. It's a circle, and this is something. This foil is really done for this purpose to show. Then a lot of this discussion, also in regard to these taxonomy rules, tailpipe, is really based on carbon-free and carbon neutral, and it's really important to keep it open also for carbon neutral fuels. Coming to the rules for these alternative fuels, then you can see, okay, we have rules now for methane and LNG. I will come back to this. So, and then you see for all the other fuels, there is something going on, but still we have something on the waiting list. So a lot of the fuels we are discussing today, there are no rule requirements available from the IMO in regard to this. And to give you a little bit of view, how long it did take really to come to rules and regulation. This was our timeline to develop the Aida Nova, this first LNG-driven cruise vessel. So we started in 2007. Then we have done research projects together with the EU. Then there was a customer who was really quite risky to make a contract before the rules are really in force. So at this time, we worked together with the IMO to get these rules. And 2015, it was clear that the rules will be in force at this time where the ship will be delivered. But if you look from this time frame, from 2007 to 2017, to develop rules for LNG, and if you come back then now to the list, which is there, which I presented before, so we have still a lot of to do with this, all these other fuels to get really rules which are based, where we can based on our experience. And this is a little bit also the problem we have. Also our owner is asking, and Laurent mentioned it, our ships will sail for 35 years. So they will ask, so which kind of fuel should I put on board? What kind of regulation I have for this? And what is the possibility, can I change during the lifetime of the vessel still something inside the system? Okay, so, and then in 2018, we have delivered the vessel. So this is more or less similar what also shown from Laurent. So we have the different fuels on the top. You have at the moment the different alternatives to produce your power. And to give you the information, if we are talking, more or less all of the cruise ships are diesel electric. So they have already an electric drive. We have this power production only to produce the power. The drive of the ship is already electrical. And this is compared to other ship types. If somebody says, okay, they must come to electrical, then it's a different really to other ship types. Then a container ship is still, the engine is direct coupled to the propeller, and our ships have still already a diesel electric drive. So which is in any case already a big improvement in regard to the efficiency in this. So you see the different fuels, and also there are possibilities to go in both directions. So you can go in future for fuel cells. you still can go also for the internal combustion engines. And also in regard to this, there is a development also for the internal combustion engines to look for this new fuel. So this file I take from DNV. So they are published their view on the technical readiness level of the different fuels for the different power production systems. And there it seems at least that methanol is on the best way really for engines, and also for fuel cells. There's at least an experience, but for the internal combustion engines, I think methanol is in the top, and this is what you can see also in the press release from Wärtsilä and MAN, that yes, for methanol they are clear. For ammoniac they are in the process to establish their engines, and as already mentioned, we are using these 4-stroke engines and not the 2-stroke engines. So the most development, if this will be published, is normally then this is a minority, these 4-stroke engines. So if MAN is talking about engines, then normally they are meaning 2-stroke and not 4-stroke engines. Okay, but this shows a little bit how the development is going on, and we have to carefully look in both directions. Then maybe we need it. So this is very simplified. So I said I will not make a scientific presentation. It's very simplified. For me, it's really important. Then the reformation and the fuel cell is for our industry. We have to put it together. Then this is something which is belonging direct together, and we expect that we will buy in the end, similar as an engine, a complete unit which is doing reforming and the energy production. So in Meyer we have started this fuel cell development also 15 years ago, and we started with a demonstrator on land, and this was a German project founded by the German government. It's a Paxel project. So we make a demonstrator on our shipyard, which is working on methanol. So there's the reformation and the fuel cell in one thing. Then we have done a demonstrator on a ferry, which is on the way between Finland and Sweden. And the next step was really to come to bigger units. This is also a land installation which is done by Lucerne in Germany. It's still the continuing of the Paxel project. And in this project, we will now install, I will come back in the foil later to this 2 times 100 kW on the AIDA Nova, which will be done in the next time. Then it was still some delays based on COVID, but now they will start the installation on this. Coming back, this shows a little bit what we have done on the AIDA Nova. So this shows also that to integrate a fuel cell inside a complete complex system like a cruise ship is not really a trivial thing. So this is quite complicated. So you have to look for all the different safety systems. You have to look to integrate it in your existing power system. You have to integrate it in your electrical system. More or less all the systems has to be connected. So this is a nice exercise we started, and I think it's quite important. This integration part is really something we have deeper to think about, and this is crucial later on for the installation of bigger installations. So we started also with this project, which is also funded by the German government. This called High Cruise. There we will install 4.5 megawatt fuel cells, and this is an anti-PEM fuel cell. We have a cooperation in this project together with Freudenberg, and this is much more already the learning now how we can integrate it. So this 4.5 megawatt will cover the hotel load of the ship. And this will be then really a nice experience if this is functioning in this way. one exercise or one experience is already, you have to install a battery, then you have to smoothen the load of the system. So it's the size of the battery system, it's still something we will learn out of this, but at least you have to do something in regard to this. So there must be a combination later on also for bigger installations in regard with batteries and fuel cells. Okay, and as Laurent also mentioned, yes, Waterborne has driven a lot of these things. We are quite happy that we have this partnership together with the European Union to really look into this in the carbon future. And this is really important for us that we are following this way. So a short conclusion from my side. So the development of really commercial usable fuel cell system for maritime application is in progress, but there is still a lot of things to do. And we are starting with very small units and we have to scale up it. And before we really come to a 100% fuel cell ship, or if maybe a 100% fuel ship is not really possible. Nobody knows at the moment really if we are looking later on in the power distribution, in the power demand of the vessel, is it really possible to use 100% fuel cells from one type, or should be maybe mixed with different types in regard to the flexibility and these things. We still have to look in all different fuel options. So this is at the moment, we discussed it already in between. So for me, there is no silver bullet. And I think this is a quite big risk. And this is coming also to my next point. We really need to enforce the rule development, but we should not do it in this way that we are favoring a different fuel or a technical option. Then we are limiting us really, and at this stage, with the knowledge we have today, this would be really dangerous. Okay, that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hermann Josef, for the detailed information about a very combined approach. Same as no solution, not one solution fits all. So you're there on one side. I think we can take a few questions before we reshuffle for our podium discussion. So Berend? Sorry, Linda.
I think one question is, I will ask on behalf of Berend because I also don't know the answer. That's about the NT-PEMFC. I mean, I know the LT, low temperature, and high temperature PEM fuel cell, but yeah, NT is new for me. What?
NT is it's a low temperature.
Is it?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe there's a translation from the foil. Niedrigtemperatur.
Ah, okay. It's German, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
This was a translation mistake.
My other question is more general, maybe also to Laurent, but we also face this issue. Even within the Nautilus project, we shortlist 5 possible future fuels for the cruise market. And so, of course, opting for a certain solution today would you run the risk of stranded assets, technology lock-in, etc. On the other hand, by not making a choice, investors might not be investing in new cruise ships at the moment because they don't know what to invest in. Is this some risk that you somehow see, and how would we mitigate it?
I think we are looking deeply in methanol, which is from the point of view, if you're looking to shipping, it's a quite simple fuel. Then it's liquid under atmospheric conditions. And also in regard to the rules, you can use rectangular tanks. This is something which is used to usual shipbuilding. So this gives also advantages if we are looking later in retrofit. And if we are talking about the lifetime of these vessels will be still 35 years. And we are now in the year 22. So they will in 2050. The vessels we are building today will stay maybe alive there. So we have to do something. And then in regard maybe to retrofit, methanol could be an option which is quite easy or easier to do than other options. So, but we as shipyard, we are looking also in the e-methane. Then we are delivering now, and this is what Asit has shown also. All our cruise ships we have in our order book now are working on LNG. So we have to give our owner also the possibility to use in the future e-methane and possibilities fuel cell solution for e-methane. So this is at least this is existing. So we cannot sell something where it's no future inside. So this is but the other discussion, which is really the real thing, this is no silver bullet.
Clear. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, then I just quickly checked. Then I think we should take the time to reshuffle. I suggest that
all these technologies that came up, we heard already a lot that there is no silver bullet we can find. And maybe let's start with a kind of easy question. And maybe we start with you if you want to. I will just proceed with that and ask you also kind of the same question. What do you think are, especially because you were talking that much about ammonia, are the strengths of carbon-containing synthetic fuels and the non-carbon-containing synthetic fuels? So taking into account ammonia, but also the other e-fuels like synthetic natural gas, LNG, for example. So where do you see the challenges and the strengths and weaknesses?
Sure. So the reason why we would favor hydrogen and ammonia is because indeed these are zero carbon fuels. So we do not need to worry about the source of carbon. And this is a great asset of these fuels. Now, there are, of course, different physical characteristics, and this was very well presented by the shipyard's perspective. But I think that we need to also look at the costs, because having to source the carbon comes also at a cost, because it's another step that you have to include in the process. And every step, especially for e-fuels, come at a higher cost. So for that reason, we think that, yes, of course, e-methanol or e-methane can be sustainable, but then that also comes at a higher cost for the ship owners, for the operators. So that needs to be taken into account.
So do you talk about then just the economic costs or also the LCA costs in terms of how much it costs the society, let's say, to use these fuels? It's just economic, what you said.
Yeah, I was talking about the fuel costs, so really from the ship owner perspective, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot. Maybe I'm just gonna ask you the same question. What do you think are, when you compare the non-carbon and the carbon-containing fuels, the main weaknesses and strength of both of them?
Yeah, I have shown in my presentation that the cost for the production of these synthetic fuels is tremendous. So you have to spend 3 times the energy or 2 to 3 times the energy inside which you have in the end. This is for sure. I think, but you have also to consider that the fuel must be later handled of seafarers, and it must be really practical to do it. So we have shown in our figure, so to use really liquid hydrogen is something which is really more or less not possible. So you have to deliver 1.5 vessel, and the half vessel is filled with hydrogen then.
Maybe just a short question there. I've seen, like, within your presentation, that was not part within the other presentations. Didn't it just take into account the LH2? so liquefied hydrogen, but also LOHC, which is just coming up.
Yeah.
I was honestly a bit surprised when I just saw the kilowatt per liters, something like the energy content, that it was still so high, because from my information till now, I don't know if tanks were included, for example, as well. They are kind of in the same range than LH2.
Yeah, there are different figures. So some of these producers say that the volume is higher than for liquid hydrogen. But still there are a lot of competition also in this area, and also this is a level and system which is not really proven in the moment. So the industry is working on it, but still we have not really experience on this.
Yeah, the TRL is pretty low still.
The TRL is pretty low, and also this would have consequences later on the complete ship design also. Then you have a loaded liquid and you have a deloaded liquid later on. So you're still taking out only the H out of this. And so still the level of weight is the same. So if you then have, if you compare it in the end, so you have a dead weight, or you don't change your depth. So the energy consumption of the ship is more or less higher if you are using, instead you would use another fuel. Then if you are using, for example, diesel, then your diesel will empty. So your depth of the ship will go up, so you have a lower consumption. So, but this is, and we looked inside this, but this is still something which is on a low TRL level, and I don't know if this is really later on a practical solution. If you ask the manufacturer, yes, still they are believing in this solution, but still we have to look if it's really what's going on there.
Okay. Same question to you. What do you think are the main strengths and the weaknesses when you compare carbon synthetic containing and non-carbon containing synthetic fuels?
I think it was quite clear during my presentation. The new fuels like ammonia and hydrogen, the critical aspect is really the volume. And that changed dramatically the figures, the global business equation of the ship. And so compressed hydrogen, no way, even liquid hydrogen for full autonomy of the ship, it will be very difficult too. So basically there is no one single silver bullet. There is pros and cons on the different solutions. Either you have carbon-free fuels, but with quite a lot of constraints, volume in terms of hydrogen, safety about ammonia. And this is a critical point. Ammonia is a very dangerous fuel. The constraints for ammonia carrier is very high for operation. So considering that for passenger vessels, for example, I would say it's a tremendous challenge. So, and on the reverse, on methanol, on methane, have low, the impact in terms of volume, it's much less. It's something that we quite know in terms of integration. We know how to integrate LNG. Methanol is not very difficult in terms of integration, but it's carbon neutral. And so, as Delphine said, I mean, how we'll get these fuels in terms of CO2 capture, or either from the air, or either for cement or iron and steel industry, and how are we going to cope with that in terms of taxonomy and this kind of thing, to get a good idea of what will be the global price finally at the end to the ship owner is something difficult to say. But what is sure is that these new fuels will cost a lot.
Yes.
And basically by 4 to 5 folds. And so coming back again, to help to allow this new fuel transition, we need to reduce dramatically the energy consumption. And it's a key point, because if you reduce by 50% the energy consumption, you reduce the volume and the cost of the fuel by 2. So that's really what we can do now, and that's exactly what Herman Josef and myself have shown in terms of results. We are working deeply in terms of energy efficiency, and after, the new power converter will come along the way, and later on the new fuels. But we have to adjust these three parameters with different timeline to find the right compromise.
Still one comment to the ammonia.
Yes.
And ammonia is not really burning by themselves, so you have at least pilot fuel, not so less. So you will still have the pilot fuel, which still have the carbon emissions. This is something to consider. And on the other hand, at the moment, all the discussions are based only on CO2 emissions. So there will be still also other emissions we have to take care of.
Yes,
and this is something we have to have in mind. Also, if we are talking about this.
Yeah, in ammonia, for example, with internal combustion engine, you can have N2O. It's already a GHG.
Yeah.
Gas.
Yeah. I think that directly brings me to the next question, because we had this ammonia discussion. And first question is, you have shown us some figures, especially for the 2-stroke engines and 3- and 4-stroke engines, how high the greenhouse gas emissions would be in terms of CO2 equivalents. What I would like to know, if you know, maybe, if it took into account this just 100-year period of CH4, for example, with 28 times higher greenhouse gas, let's say, effect than CO2, or did it take into account the 20-year one, because this is like 84 times? And I'm just asking this question because when we compare all these figures, I think it's very important to point out what was the
No,
basis.
thank you for this question, because the 20 or 100-year period is extremely important to take into account. So for the graph that I showed with the different life cycles, this is a 100-year period, because this is what is in the European Commission proposal at the moment. And even with a 100-year period, these 4-stroke engines have a worse GHG life cycle footprint than diesel. So this is really a question of the methane emissions. And once again, it's not only about the methane slip. You do have a lot of methane emissions happening all along the supply chain. And the worst is that we don't even know how much, because there are a lot of research now about methane emissions. There are new regulations that are being put into place to reduce methane emissions from the production of natural gas, the transportation. And this is still something that remains quite uncertain. And also, I mean, in terms of the navigation as well. So how will it all look like in real life compared to the theoretical data that we have? Yeah.
But maybe I can just ask, you're saying on the one hand side now that LNG, of course, and no doubt, I think that's clear, has a huge impact when there is some kind of methane slip, but also during all this transport and getting it. But on the other hand, you're also saying that we don't actually know how much there is there. So how is it then more or less a worst case scenario we are calculating with at the moment, or is it something just a very rough estimate? Because it would change the LCA, right?
Exactly, it would completely change the LCA. So right now, what the Commission has done is to provide default values for the methane slips, depending on the type of engine. So there is, well, no SOFC, so maybe something to add.
I would be eager actually to see that, because I think like our project now with Nautilus, what we are proposing wasn't part there. I mean, of course, also within our product, we are still in development of the LCA, so we even don't have these values yet. But I would estimate when I just see the LCA there or the greenhouse gas emissions, that probably, or what would you estimate how much of these emissions were coming from the methane slip of the 2 or 3 or 4-stroke engines?
Yeah, so for example, we could see on the graph, so the most performing LNG engine, that was the 2-stroke high pressure, has a 0.2% methane slip average rate. So I think this is quite close to what a SOFC system could achieve, because this is zero methane slip, as you were mentioning, and still there was a high carbon footprint of that fuel. So if you don't go to cleaner alternatives, then there is still this problem of a high carbon footprint compared to the truly sustainable alternatives that are e-fuels.
What about the other emissions? Because I think that was just this little idea before, or pollutants, let's say, as Asif also pointed out at the beginning. PM, for example, particle matters, or some NOx, stuff like that. What about these things, and how much are they taken into account? Because the only graph we have seen now for LH3 was mostly on this.
Exactly, it's only about GHG emissions, and the reason is that the current package, the Green Deal, is about climate impact. Before that, and I think that was also mentioned by one of the speakers, that there was a big focus a few years ago on air pollution, and this is the main reason why LNG has been promoted as a marine fuel. But now we need to take a more comprehensive approach, so we need to look both at the pollutants and at the climate impact. And this is where the LNG use becomes not so beneficial when it comes to the environment.
So then I'm sorry, I'm coming back to you a second later. Because here we were talking more about shipping. So do you really think, when we have a cruise ship, and let's say we want to go for ammonia, and let's also say we have the infrastructure, but we still have double kind of the size of the tanks and stuff like that, even compared to LNG. I think it was not 2 times, but a bit less. Yeah. And do you think that this can be a solution really also for cruise ship industries, or what is your statement on that?
Well, honestly, I think that the market would have to decide, because what we're saying is that we should encourage the use of e-fuels, and this is why we want to have a mandate of 6% by 2030 to make sure that we have a minimum uptake of these e-fuels, but we're not asking the European Union to choose one specific type of fuel. So we are leaving space for innovation, basically, and it's also up to the shippers and the ship owners to decide. Yeah, we're just worried about, having a lot of orders of LNG ships, and then having ship owners facing the problems of availability of fuel supply.
Okay. Thanks. Then coming back to the shipyards. I mean, you've also talked about the emissions already a bit, but when we would switch to another fuel instead of using LNG, what do you think that it must be opted for now? Do we need to, for example, have a lot of harbors with ammonia stations? Not for cruise ships, maybe, but yeah, I also think so. Yeah, like for cruise ships, it might not be a good solution. I'm not totally sure, but for the for freight and stuff like that, I guess it might be a possibility. And how long do you think would that take to develop?
I would say for ammonia, it's not a starting point now. It's already available. There is several locations around the world where you can store ammonia, because ammonia is a product used for insurance. So basically, for example, close to Saint-Nazaire, there is a place, a few kilometers away at Montoire, where we receive ammonia carriers for insurance production. So there is, in several places around the world, some ammonia storage and ammonia bunkering available. There are industrial applications, so they are maybe not close to a port, a standard port, but there is already some infrastructure. So because it's something that is highly produced already. The matter is, depending on the ship application, can we clearly use ammonia or not? And as you mentioned, for passenger vessel, for example, it's a very risky hypothesis in terms of operation. So there will, and clearly in the fuel future, there will not be one silver bullet. And there will be several solutions for merchant vessels, maybe different one for, for passenger ferries and so on, short sea, high sea, there will be different solutions. And clearly, as Delphine mentioned, we need from the European Commission not to make a choice, to give the options open so that the community, the waterborne community, in a general sense, the shipyard, the equipment suppliers, the ship owners, the NGO, and so on, working together to find the right compromise per ship application. And maybe also even different, for example, a cruise vessel or a merchant vessel going from Asia to Europe, and compared to an expedition vessel going from Antarctica, around Antarctica, the fuel availability will be much different in terms of constraints. So depending on where you sell, how long you sell, what type of ship, you may come up with different solutions.
Mr. Mames, now we had ammonia on the one hand side. I've seen now within your presentation, the current applications are LNG, and the current applications are taking methanol also into account. I hope I did not miss it, but when is ammonia coming in, let's say, the cruise ship or bigger ship markets? If you think there isn't a market or not?
Yeah, I think for ammonia, I don't see it in the moment. At the moment, you must see all ammonia installation which are existing. These are ammonia carriers, which will use their own fuel. There is no basis in the rules at the moment for ammonia, and this is what I mentioned also in one of my points. The rule development for all these different fuels has to be done quite fast now. So it's, and I agree to Laurent, but I must say, yes, there is a distribution system for ammonia, but there's also distribution for methanol, which is a core stuff for the chemical industry. So this will be transported also worldwide. The transport of ammonia is, I think, double from that what you have on methanol. And but also this is existing already. But still, ammonia, it's really in regard to this toxic point of view, and there are experience with ammonia. So for example, a fishery vessel using ammonia for the chiller system to fridge the fishes, and this is really an installation which is quite dangerous already. So
or effective for fishing.
Yeah, it's really affecting also the rules. So you have to do a lot of things already to protect the people for this ammonia. But we have really to look. I will not take ammonia out, but on the other hand, which is my conclusion, let's open for all the things in the future. Then there could be a strong development also for ammonia in the future.
Maybe then one last question into your direction. You were talking about methanol, we were talking about e-fuels, in this case about carbon-containing e-fuels. Where do you think is all this carbon coming from? Do you also think that there will be this direct air capture, for example, or?
At least carbon capture is something we have to look inside. Maybe in front of the combustion or after the combustion, this is still something. Also, there are projects running in this regard to carbon capture. And if you look to the market, there are already, if you're looking to the development, so in Korea, they are developing a combination of an ammonia tanker, which can take also CO2. So one way will be ammonia, on the back way to take the CO2. And this is, let's say, from the point of view of this gas, it's quite similar in temperature and pressure also, that you can do it in one carrier. Also, only the aggressivity of ammonia is quite higher, so you have to choose a really good material in regard to this. But there are a lot of things going on, but I think carbon capture is something we have to consider in the one or other way.
Okay. Sabine, you also wanted to enter. How much time do we have left?
Yes, we have a couple of minutes left. I'd like to open up the discussion to the people on site. If there are any questions you would like to contribute with, any comments that you have, just for a couple of minutes, if there's anything you'd like to share. Asif?
I allow myself to already go to this question. It is more, we talked about the carbon capture, and the question one is raised that is onboard carbon capture a relevant technology for emission-free shipping? So it's mostly relevant for two shipyard. I understand it's a energy intensive and storage intensive option, but have a thought been given to it?
Yes, I may answer to that.
Yes, you may not. No.
Okay, I think we have to get back to the figures that I showed you before earlier. The technical volume of a cruise ship is 50%. If we start to store carbon inside the ship after the, for example, the internal combustion engine, it will increase the technical volume dramatically, because CO2 storage is really inefficient in terms of volume. So it will increase dramatically the volume. So will it be acceptable for the ship owner in terms of business? I have some doubt about it. But for different ships, it's already under investigation. For example, if you have a merchant vessel or container ship, where the technical volume is very little, 5%, 10% maximum. And in that case, if you reduce the volume of the commercial volume by 10% to store CO2, that's not going to change dramatically the business model. So clearly, again, there is different solution per ship application. So we can maybe store some CO2 for some small hours, but storing CO2 for 1 week, for example, cruise, I don't believe it.
Are there any questions online or from somebody else in the audience?
Yeah,
here?
online we can actually see. I can just encourage everyone online